want to like just have this part be of like well. Imagine an 8-year-old girl sits in front of a mirror, and one thought is in the back of her mind: be thinner, be thinner, be thinner. She tries to ignore it, but at some point she breaks and begins to take action. Some of you may know that this is sort of the beginning of what an eating disorder looks like. Here is the definition of an eating disorder, which is any of a range of psychological disorders characterized by abnormal or disturbed eating habits from dictionary.com, just in case you didn't know what that was. I realized I should have put when to switch slides on here, because I don't remember. That's okay.
Yeah.
Something to work on for later. So, let's switch slides again. Or no. I think I don't. I think. I am credible to speak on this topic because I've been studying eating disorders and their related disorders for 4 years, and I have personal experience with them because I have a lot of friends who've experienced eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors, which are not the same thing. So, I should just be able to do this. And I would have to know. Okay. My thesis statement is diet culture in the home is a large factor in the development of eating disorders in young children, and my main points will be like that eating disorder in young age groups is actually a problem, and then what are some of the causes and the solutions that I have come up with. So let's begin by looking at some statistics. All of these I got from the internet, but they were credible sources, so it's okay. I don't need to say that. Less than 25% of elementary girls are dieting, but the people who do diet know all about counting calories and checking your weight and things like that. It's still being studied, but we are starting to see that ARFID might be in 3 to 5% of kids. ARFID is avoidant restricted food intake disorder, which is kind of like a really, really intense version of just being picky. Did it switch or did it not switch? No, okay, there we go. 46% of 9 to 11-year-old children are sometimes or often on diets, and 82% of families of those children are sometimes or often on diets. 30% of people who diet become pathological dieters, which is something that I don't know exactly what it means, but it's like it becomes something you have to do instead of something you want to do. And 20 to 25% of pathological dieters develop partial or full syndrome eating disorders. Between 1999 and 2006, hospitalization of children under the age of 12 for eating disorders went up by 119%. So I was really interested about this topic, and I decided to do a survey of the whole school. So here are some of the results for that. I got 140 results, so it was fun reading through all the answers that I allowed people to answer freely. That took a while. 30% of people said that they heard 5 to 10, they heard someone talking about diet, weight, or exercise 5 to 10 times per day just in general. And 37.9% of people said they heard it 5 to 10 times per day in their house. For the age of the youngest person people have heard talking about diet, weight, and exercise, 12.4% of people said age 10, 9.3% of people said age 9, and 8.6% of people said age 11. Do you consider yourself a healthy person? 12.4% of people, no, that was wrong. Restart. 38.6% of people said yes, and 16.4% of people said no. And then are calories and scale numbers something you ever think about? 41.4% of people said no, and 45.7% of people said yes. With these questions, it's kind of hard to do numbers. So basically, 44% of people think that eating disorders are not a good thing, and that they do affect people and are affected by diet culture, and then 88 people think that diet culture does contribute to eating disorders. Okay. That's the wrong way. So now that we know that there really is a problem, we need to figure out why there is a problem. And most of the time when you hear someone say like what reason for eating disorders, they'll be like, oh, it's their environment. It's like the things that they're around. And for the most part, that is correct. There are a lot of other factors, but environment is a big one. And under that, there's social media, peers, family, and genetics. So the first point we're going to look at is social media. I don't think anyone's going to deny that their social media has contributed to a lot of problems. Ms. Smith, one of the school nurses, says that body shaming and Photoshop, which are on a lot of things like Instagram and Twitter and a lot of those social medias that are new now, has contributed to the rise of eating disorders, because now that we can make things look different than they are, we can make people think things are normal when they are not. Then the second point of this is peers. Peers do things that influence us. They tell us things about ourselves or talk about us behind our back, and then we know what they're saying. And so we'd be like thinking about it and be like, Becky, you should lose 5 pounds. And you think they're joking, but maybe you think they're joking, but like internally you kind of know they're not. So that really kind of affects people a lot. Catherine Steiner Adar, who is an eating disorder doctor, says that repressive cultural forces like peers being repressive has helped contribute to eating disorders. So the third point is genetics, and I feel like some people might be like, genetics? What does that have to do with eating disorders? Why would you say that? That's not a thing. But you can be genetically predisposed to have an eating disorder just as much as you can be genetically predisposed to being more likely to be overweight or more likely to get cancer. When you're genetically predisposed to something, that doesn't mean it will happen, it just means it's more likely to happen. And so you can be genetically predisposed to have an eating disorder and never get one in your life, but you just have a higher risk and a higher chance of something like that happening. And then the fourth cause is your family. And again, people will be like, how does your family have anything to do with eating disorders developing in children? Families are supposed to like help raise their kids. But again, the nurse agreed with me on this. What parents do and say like very much affects kids, and who they're around when they see someone older than them doing something, they think, well, I want to do that because I want to be like them. And a parent's mentality about themselves really affects how a kid thinks about themselves. There. Then a disclaimer for the next point. Disordered eating and eating disorders are not the same thing. A little bit of an example would be like a disordered eating behavior would be something like skipping meals, only eating the same thing ever, very carefully not letting your food touch each other on the plate. And having 1 or 2 disordered eating behaviors is just natural. So some people have them, some people don't. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about an eating disorder or not. But if they become like you have a lot of them, or you start to like do them all the time, or they become something that you fixate on, then that can be signs that you're leading up to an eating disorder. So it's fine to have a few, but if it's getting to be like a lot, then you might want to check something out. So now I'm going to give a personal story, a little bit more of like evidence. My family is very health conscious. They weren't as much when I was younger, but because of more medical problems, a lot of my family is on different kinds of diets. My mom has been on a bunch of different diets recently. She isn't right now because she just had a surgery. And my dad lost like 100 pounds because he broke his leg. And then my sister has been on a diet since she was born because she's allergic to dairy and eggs. So like it's not like a diet, but it is a diet. So I'm surrounded by people completely always talking about like calories or like I can't eat this because of whatever. And so I don't have an eating disorder, but I have experienced having disordered eating behaviors, which like I said, they're not the same thing, but they can be contributed to that. And I feel like one of the many reasons why that's happened is because I'm surrounded by people talking about it, and that's influenced me from a young age to think about things from that perspective. And so people talking about that around me makes me think about it, and then I'm thinking about that a lot, and so then when I go to eat something, I'm like thinking the same thoughts as people around me. And I feel like some young kids could have had the same experience as me, not everyone, but a lot of young kids could be seeing what their parents are doing and how their parents are eating and start to think about that and think, because my parents always looked perfectly healthy to me, but they wanted to diet, and so then in my head it's like, well, if you look perfectly healthy, that doesn't mean you can't diet, therefore you should diet. And so that's sort of how my brain works. So I'm thinking that some kids could have brains that work the same way as mine. And yes, so on to the third point, which is, I forgot what the third point is, so I have to switch. Oh, yeah, the third point is, hi.
Oh, you're still finishing? Okay.
Yeah. The third point is, how can we fix that? So how can we prevent kids from having my experience and the experience of a lot of other people? So first of all, before I talk about these, explain to your kids that what you see on social media is not real life. People don't actually look like supermodels. They are not like us, and we don't need to be like them, and they're probably very much photoshopped. And then, so here are some things that we personally can do is know our audience. So who are we talking to? What are we talking to them about? Are they okay with hearing that, or is it something that makes them uncomfortable? And then thinking about what we're going to say before we say it. Is it going to help whoever you're saying it to say this, or is it going to upset them? And it might not be upsetting on purpose. You might not think it's an upsetting thing to say, but like you should try to figure that out before you say it. Or if you like have said it in the past and then you know, then don't do it again. That kind of is something you should do anyway. Be aware of your own mentality. Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you content with yourself, or are you doing it because you want to change something? And is it something that you're like actively thinking about, or is it something that's sort of subconscious and you don't realize that you're doing it until you start to think about that you're doing it? What is your motive? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it for like a healthy reason or an unhealthy reason? So to conclude, I think that having diet culture has really influenced people to start having eating disorders at a much younger age than they had before. And we looked at the problem that it does exist, and we looked at some causes like genetics, family, environment, peers, and we looked at some solutions of how to solve it, as in like watching what we say around young kids and trying to think about things in just a more healthy way in general. Please, if you feel like it, check out this website, which is www.nationaleatingdisorders.org, and it will show you like some differences between eating disorders and disordered eating, and then you can see if you or any of your family members have any disordered eating behaviors, just out of curiosity, not of like, let's diagnose you. So to conclude, we, all of us, influence people around us. Sisters, younger brothers, siblings, cousins, and what if we're influencing them in a negative way? And if we are, then we need to make sure that we change whatever we're doing to more influence people positively. Thank you.